All right, so we are going to be learning about Y-intercept and what it means. So here are notes that you are going to be completing as you go through the lesson with me. So please make sure that you are opening up your Notability and putting in these blank notes. These are the 5.5 Y-intercept notes you'll find in Schoology, and have your video opened with your notes on Notability. All right, so the essential question says, what does the y-intercept tell you about the equation being graphed? So we learned about slope last week, and today we are going to learn about the y-intercept. They are going to go together with what we are going to be learning on Wednesday. So the y-intercept. The y-intercept of a graph is the value of y, so that's important to know. So it's the y value at which the graph crosses that y-axis. So when we're looking at these three graphs that are pictured here, it is telling us, so on this first one, our y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. So the y-axis is the line that goes straight up and down, the intercept, the axis that goes straight up and down. So if I highlight here, this is the y-intercept straight up and down. Y-intercept, y-intercept. So I am looking at where does the blue line and the pink line intersect. Where does it cross? It crosses at 0. So my y-intercept is 0, which makes it even further. It's the point 0, 0. So when we look at the second graph here, it is crossing when it is at 1, 2, 3, 4. So you're looking at where your graph is crossing the y-axis. And on this third point, it is below 0. So it is at 1, 2, 3, but that's a negative, so negative 3. So we're going to be looking through some stuff and figuring out where the y-intercept is. So it says the graph y equals x plus 3. What is the y-intercept? Well, let's make a table. When we go to graph, before we, because eventually you're going to know how to graph from an equation, but we're going to just create a table. So we have our x values and our y values. And the 5 best numbers that we can use when graphing, if they don't tell us what to use, would be -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. So our equation is x plus 3. So I'm going to take my x value, in this case, it's -2, and I'm going to add 3 to it. So -2 plus 3 is 1. So in my graph, I go to -2, up to 1, and I put a point. Now you don't have to add these extra little lines. It's just showing you where -2, 1 is. So come back to here. Now I have -1, again, plus 3, and I get 2. So I go to my graph, -1, 2, put a point. So we always go the side to side, and then this is our up and down movement. So it's 0. 0 plus 3 gives me 3. 1 plus 3 gives me 4. 2 plus 3 gives me 5. So I have 0, 3, 1, 4, 2, 5. So I can connect my line. Oops. And I am looking, where does it cross this y-axis? When we zoom in, where does it cross? It crosses at this point, which is at 1, 2, 3. So we can say that our y-intercept equals 3. And that's our answer. All right, these next ones give us the graphs. So we're going to go look at 2 graphs, and we're going to look at it from the equations. So this first graph, we're looking for the y-intercept. So again, this is our y-axis. If it helps you, highlight the axis so you can see where it goes through. So the line and the line here and the y-axis intersect right at this point. And what is that point? -2. So when I look at this next graph, where does the blue line and the orange axis intersect? Right here, and that is at 2. So that's looking at the graphs. Now in equations. In an equation, it is the number added or subtracted to x. So the number being added or subtracted to x. So it's not the y, it's not the x, it's what you have added or subtracted. In this case, it's -3. So you need to put what the operation is. If it is subtracting, it's negative. But in this case, not the y, not the x, I'm adding, so it's a +3. So I'm going to give you one more. Y equals 2x minus 1. What would it be? If you are thinking the subtracting 1, then your answer would be -1. All right, so it says, your friend says that the graph of every linear equation must cross the y-axis. Find a counterpoint. So, or a counterexample. This is telling us an example that proves her wrong. So she's saying that every graph is going to have a y-axis. Well, think of it this way. Here's my equation, or here's my coordinate graph, and here is my graph of x equals 3. It's a linear line. It's a linear equation, straight line, but will it cross the y-axis here? Nope. So this is an example. When you have an undefined slope, you will have a graph that does not have a y-axis. All right, part E, you get a graph. It's all about the snow on the ground. We want to know, what is the y-intercept? What does it show or represent? What is the slope, and what does the slope represent? So let's look at the y-intercept first. The y-intercept is where it's going to cross that y-axis. So I'm going to highlight my y-axis. Now, here is our line. Where does this line cross the y-axis? If you're thinking 3, you are correct. So the y-intercept is 3. Now, what does that represent? Well, if the bottom axis is ours and the side axis is the height, that is telling us the amount of snow on the ground to start with. So in this graph, it is telling us our starting point. Now, the slope of this graph, we have two equations, or sorry, not two equations. We have multiple points. So I'm just going to start at my y-intercept, and I'm going to go to the very next point here. So I'm going to go from these two. Now, quick refresher. Slope, change in y over change in x. So my rise over my run. In this case, and you always go from left to right. In this case, I'm starting at this point here. Am I increasing? Am I going up, or am I going down to get to the next point? If you said up, you're right. I go from 3 to 4. So I go up 1. And then I run over 1, 2. I run over 2. So in this case, my slope is 1/2. And what does that represent? What that represents is 1 inch per every 2 hours. Because inches are the top number, hours are the bottom number. All right, one more example. A bottle of dish soap starts to leak. The line models the amount of soap in the bottle. What is the y-intercept, and what does it represent? So first off, I just want us to look at this. So this is telling us that our x value, the bottom value, are your hours. And then the y values are the dish soap that's left in the bottle. Now, when I look from left to right, what kind of a slope is this? If you said negative slope, you would be correct. Now, I want us to find the slope as just a refresher. I know it's not a question on here. But if I start at this point and I go to the very last point, I am going down. So I go down 6. And I'm running all the way over to what? 18. So because I'm going down, it's a negative. And negative 6 over 18 reduces to negative 1 over 3. So that would be my slope. Just a refresher. But what we're really looking for is the y-intercept. So the y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. So it's at that point right there. What is that? It is 6. And what does it represent? Well, in this case, we are looking at dish soap. So it represents the amount of soap that started in the bottle. All right, there you go. Please go on to Pearson Relays and complete your homework. If you get stuck, come back to your notes. It'll be a helpful guide for you.